so let's talk about section 7.3, which is going to be the cost in the short run. So we talked about the production, so let's figure out the cost of that production. So we already talked about some of the factor payments, right? So the wages, rent, the salaries, maybe the interest and the dividends that we're going to be paying out. Let's go a little bit deeper into that. Like we're going to split those costs up, the payments into the factors of production. We're going to split that up into fixed and variable cost. So variable costs are going to be the things that are variable, right? So the cost of the variable inputs like labor, like ingredients. The only way you can increase or decrease the cost of these things is by actually changing the amount that you're buying. Okay, so when we're talking about variable costs, right? So the variable costs are going to be changing. So like if I had one employee, my cost would be $10. But if I had two employees, my cost would be $20, right? So because I have more employees, higher cost. So variable cost. So if I had a chart here and I had quantity of labor, and then I had my total cost, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, let's say it's 10, 20, 30, 40. Now you're probably thinking like, well, the marginal here is the same, and that's true, right? The marginal here would be 10 because you're increasing by 10 each time, but the total variable cost, right? The variable cost is increasing. And if you're still confused about that, let me tell you about fixed cost. Fixed cost is going to be things like rent. So if you're making 0 t-shirts or 1,000,000 t-shirts, your rent is $1,000. So if you had, 1, 2, 3, 4 employees, right, your rent or your total fixed cost stays the same. So let's say it's 5. All right, so it's 5 the whole way through. If you had 1 employee or 4 employees, your total fixed cost would be 5 because your rent, things like that, doesn't change. So the thing with a fixed cost is that this is the expenditure that you have at the beginning of your production. Like in order for you to just start producing, right, you need to have some sort of fixed cost, whether it be a machine that you need, whether it be a building that you need some sort of fixed cost in order to get started. Most of the time we're going to be talking about rent. The main thing here is that these do not change with production. Okay, so if we're looking at a chart here and we had total fixed cost and total variable cost, right? If it's 50 for rent, right, and you made 0 t-shirts, it's 50. But if you made infinity amount of t-shirts, your total fixed cost would be 50. That's your rent. You're probably thinking, well, there are some rent agreements that are going to be different where they will be variable upon your sales, and that is true, right? But most of those agreements do have a minimum, like minimum $1,000 in rent plus a percentage of sales. So either way, right, you do have that fixed cost of the rent. And then variable costs would go like 0, 10, 20, infinity, right? The variable cost, as you have more, you will be having a higher variable cost. So the variable cost will change, fixed cost do not. And we will add those together to get the total cost. You're going to add your rent, you're going to add any other things that you need for production, total cost. Okay? So how we're going to find this is we're going to use the production function. We're going to flip it around. Basically, we have the quantity, like how much to make 1, 2, 3, 4 widgets. Widgets are just a good, right? So when I say stuff, that could mean trees, it could mean apples, it could mean widgets. Widgets are a product that we could be selling. So here, right, to make one widget, it's going to cost you 3.25 workers. So you need 3.25 people working in order to do this. So the cost here is 32.5. Okay? But then as we want to increase the quantity to 4, okay, well, how can you increase the quantity? You need to increase the labor, and because you do that, that's going to change your cost. So what's happening to cost? Right, as quantity is going up, the total variable cost is also increasing. Okay. That's what's going on there. So we're gonna have total fixed cost. We're gonna have total variable cost. We're gonna have total cost. Now, based off of these three, right, we're gonna figure out the average total cost. So this is useful information because sometimes we want to figure out, well, what's the average cost of making a single t-shirt, right? So like considering everything about rent, employees, materials, what is that average cost of making a single t-shirt? So that's pretty useful information, the average total cost. All you're going to do is take the total cost and divide it by the quantity. So if your total cost was 500 and you made 5 t-shirts, okay, right, you would do 500 divided by 5. And so if you have your calculator, you can do 100. So your average cost for a t-shirt is 100. Okay? That's all you're doing. Take total divided by the quantity, and that's your average. We can also find the marginal cost. As we know with the marginal, right, you're looking at that change, that difference there. So basically, if you wanted to make another t-shirt, what's the extra cost that you have there? So the marginal cost is that delta total cost. Basically what this thing is the change in total cost divided by the change in quantity. So basically because quantity changes, how much does total cost change? What's the extra cost of that next unit? And that's going to be very useful information because we have to figure out like what is the best amount of stuff that we want to make. And well, we need to figure out, well, what's the cost of making one more? The next thing we're going to figure out is the average variable cost. And so this is pretty useful information as well because now we're only focusing on the variable. Okay, and we're trying to figure out, well, how productive is our variable inputs? Are they too high? Are they too low? Do we need to change our price because of the variable cost? So the average variable cost is going to be pretty useful information. And all you're going to do is take the total variable cost and divide it by the quantity. So as we know with average is you add together and divide by how many you have, right? So average variable cost would be taking the total variable cost and divided by the quantity. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here. So if your variable cost were 300, okay, and your quantity was 5 again, right, you would do your calculator, you would do 300 divided by 5, and that should be 60. Okay. And then finally, we have the average fixed cost. So for the average fixed cost, what you're doing there is you're going to take, the total fixed cost and divide it by the quantity. This information will kind of help you out and figure out, where you are at in the production process. Are you in the beginning stages? Are you in the late stages? How much of a factor is your fixed cost in your pricing of something or the cost of something? All you're going to do is take the total fixed cost and divide it by the quantity. So we'll take 200 and divide it by 5, and then that should be 40. Okay. So that's how we find the average total cost. That's how we find the marginal cost, the average variable cost, and the average fixed cost. That's how we find this. We just take the total divided by the quantity, or if marginal, we'll find the change. Okay. So that's how we're going to find them. Okay. So let's do that here, right? Because looking here, right, here's a total cost, 32.5. Okay. Average cost, right? That's going to be the total divided by the quantity. So you'll do 32.5 right here divided by 1, and that should be 32.5. For the next one, you would do 44 divided by 22, and 44 divided by 2, and that'll be 22. For the next one, you'll do 52 divided by 3, and that'll give you 17.33. And for the next one, you should do 90 divided by 4, 22.5. Marginal cost is going to be looking at that marginal, like the change. So going from 32.5 to 44, that is a change of 11.5. All they did there was they did 44 minus 32.5. So to make that extra quantity, to make that second one, not total 2, because if you were to make total 2, it'd be 44. But to make the second one cost you 11.50. Then the third one's going to cost you 8, right? Because we're going from 44 to 52, so that's a cost of 8. And then you go from 52 to 90, and that's going to be a marginal cost of 38. So that means to make the fourth unit, it cost 38. Okay, so that's what's happening there on marginal cost. So let's do a little chart here. Okay. So we have our quantity here, and we have our labor. Okay. So what's going to happen here is that, you know, if we want to increase the quantity, we need to be increasing the labor, right? And then also we need to pay rent for the barbershop, right? In order to have, you know, to cut hair, we need to have some sort of space in order to do it. So that's going to be the rent there. So let's say it's 160. So if we had 0 haircuts, then what is the cost? Okay, let's think about it. You know, if you had your shop and everything, but nobody's coming in, right? You're not having to pay for the soap, or you have to pay for the electricity, the extra electricity to run the clippers or anything like that, right? You're not having to pay the extra variable cost here, but you know, you're still having the space. So even if you had 0, like, people coming in, you still have to pay the fixed cost. So at 0 haircuts, your total cost is going to be the same as your total fixed cost. The reason is like, let's think about pizzas, for example. All right, if nobody comes in to buy your pizza, how many pizzas are you making? 0. But you still have to pay rent for the place. So even if you had 0 pizzas, you still have to pay the rent. So your total cost is going to be equal to the total fixed cost. But what happens when you want to do more output? Well, if you want to do more output, we need more labor. And because you have more labor, you need to pay them. So the more labor you have, the higher the variable cost will be. But what are you noticing about fixed cost? It's fixed, meaning it doesn't change. So it'll be 160 the whole way down. And then total cost, all we're going to do is we're just going to add straight across here. Yeah, that's all we're going to do for that one. It's just, for total cost, is total fixed plus total variable. Okay. Boom. And if we were to put all this information on a graph here, if we were to put the total cost on a graph, we would see that it starts at 0 output. It starts at 160. It starts at that 160. So even if you had 0 quantity, you're still starting at $160 and then going up from there. So that's what the total cost would look like. Okay. Now, in terms of the average, let's do the average real quick. Right. So for the average, remember, you're going to do total cost divided by quantity. So for that one, you know, you're going to need to do, let's get a calculator out. You need to do 240. So let's look at the average total cost. So we'll do 240 divided by 16. Okay, and that should equal 15. And then we'll do this one. We'll do 400 divided by quantity, not labor. Okay, quantity. We need to be 60. Okay, so boom, boom, boom. So it'll be 6.67. And we'll do this last one here. That should be 720 divided by 82, and that should equal 8.78. Okay, so that's how we find the average total cost. If you wanted to find the average fixed cost, right, all you're going to do is take 160. So average fixed cost, you would do each quantity, right? You would do 160 divided by 16. 160 divided by 40. 160 divided by 82. And that should equal 1.95. You can do the same thing for the variable cost. You can do average variable cost, and that should be 560 divided by 82, and that should be 6.83. Ready? Now, what is interesting is that we already know that, total cost is equal to total fixed plus total variable. And what you'll also see is that the average total cost is equal to average fixed plus average variable. And we can see that right here, because if we did 195 plus 6.83, this will equal 8.78. Boom. All right. If you wanted to find the marginal cost, you can do that too. Right. All you're going to do is do 240 to 320. So that's a change of 80. All we're doing is 320 minus 240. So 80. If you want to go here, that'll be 80 again. If you want to go here, that'll be 80 again. All right. So the marginal cost is 80. If you were to graph the average total cost, average variable cost, marginal cost, and average fixed cost, you more than welcome can. And what they're going to look like is this. Okay. As you can see here, the marginal cost is going like this. It's going here and then going up. Average total cost is going here and here. Average variable cost is going here and here. This is kind of hard to see. So in general, here's how the cost curves work. Okay, cost curves. Here's how they go. You have the cost, quantity. You have the marginal cost. Marginal cost is going to be like a Nike check mark. Okay, it's going to go down. It's going to go back up. Then you're going to have the average total cost, which is going to look like this. You're going to have the average variable cost, which looks like this. And then you're going to have the average fixed cost, which looks like this. Okay. So the average total cost is going to be a U shape, like a smiley face. Okay. And total cost is going to be the higher one, right? Because it's average fixed plus average variable. So average total. Average total cost is going to be up there. Then it's going to be average variable. And then the bottom one is going to be the average fixed cost. So anytime I ask you to draw the cost curves, I'm looking for this. I'm looking for a Nike check mark, two smiley faces, and a downward sloping line. That's what I'm looking for. Now, it's very key here that you make sure to draw the marginal cost and the average variable and the average total in the right location. Okay? Because in the right location, it's going to look like this. Okay. Okay, so not price, sorry. It's going to be cost, quantity. So we should have a Nike check mark. Now, the average total should look like this. The minimum average total, that's where we equal the marginal cost. So marginal cost equals the average total cost at the minimum ATC. Same thing goes with the average variable cost. So again, we're going to have the minimum. So MC equals AVC at the minimum AVC. Okay, so that's where they happen. At the minimum points there, that's where they're equal every time. Okay. With this information, what's going to happen here is, like, now I can tell you, like, if marginal cost is lower than the average variable cost. So like right here. So at this level of production here, okay, this is your marginal cost. Here's your average variable cost. when your average variable cost is more than your marginal cost, and you were to increase production, what is happening to average variable cost? Average variable cost, if we were to increase production, would decrease. Okay. Let's try that again. If average total cost is greater than marginal cost, so let's say right here, here's the marginal cost. Here, let me erase this. So we have this marginal cost. So at this level of production, this is the marginal cost. All I'm doing is quantity here, and whenever that hits the marginal cost, which is here, that is the marginal cost. This is the average total cost. Okay, so that line there is just telling you what you're hitting. Are you hitting the marginal cost or the average total cost? Okay, so if ATC is more than the marginal cost, okay, and you were to increase production, okay, so now we're here at the purple dot. Okay, what happened to ATC? ATC goes down. Okay, so when quantity goes up, ATC goes down. When they're flipped, it's going to be flipped. So when ATC is less than the marginal cost and quantity were to go up, ATC were to increase. And let's see that in action here. Okay. So if we were to have a situation where your marginal cost is more than your average variable cost, average total cost, and you were to increase production again, right, your ATC is now increasing if you were to increase production. If that's a little confusing, here's a little summary for you. When the MC is below the AVC, this means the increase in production will decrease the average variable cost. Right? So if here, 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 whenever the AVC is more than the MC, and you were to increase production, AVC goes down. When the marginal cost is above the AVC, this means increasing production will increase the AVC. All these rules are the same for the ATC. All it is just about where you are on the graph, and if you were to increase production, what happens to the AVC and ATC. If you're ever confused, just draw the graph, and the graph will have the answer. Okay? Now, with this information, we are able to get to the profit margin. We'll get more into that in the next section about profit margin. But now that we know ATC, we can then figure out profit margin for sure. Okay? So the main thing about this video was discussing the different cost curves that we have. Okay? Average total, average variable, the marginal cost, and the average fixed cost. Very important stuff there. Okay? I'll see you in section 7.4. Okay?